All right. Howdy, everybody. So, let me get situated here real quickly. So yes, we got a question on the website. Now, here's the thing. Let's start with that. A little bit of business before we start. I've been telling you guys that you can go to eddielewis.com. Let me open up that and I'll walk you through it. So like if you can't be here for the Q&A at this time, you can put questions on my website. Now you go to eddielewis.com, you click on videos, and then the first column, you got to scroll down just a tiny bit. The first column to the left says live stream Q&A. You can click on that. We can also watch this from there, by the way. Like if you miss the Q&A and it's not coming up on YouTube like you would want to, you can do what I just said. So let me say that again. Go to eddielewis.com, click on videos. Now, if you're on your phone, you have to click on that little line thing up in the corner, and then the menu comes down. Okay? So click on the second item in the menu that says videos. That'll take you to the video page. Scroll down a little bit and it'll take you to the very first column, because I have this is the page on my website where I've organized all of the videos, okay? So that you don't have to go to YouTube, because YouTube doesn't give you much organizational stuff, and I'm all over the map if you go there. If you go to my video page on eddielewis.com, it's all categorized. So, and the very first one is the Trumpet Q&A, this video, okay? Now, if you scroll down to the very bottom, there's a place there that says leave a reply. And basically, I want you to use that to ask your questions in advance. Now, if you ask other places, like send me an email and stuff like that, that's fine too. I can't promise that I'll answer it there because there's too many sources coming in and I might forget. Okay, so that's all I'm saying is I might forget to check one of the sources. This source, and we got one today. It says, how do I increase my endurance? That's from Howard. Okay, so we're going to start today's Q&A off by talking about how to increase your endurance. And before we do that, let's talk about two different kinds of endurance. Now that I've said that out loud, it's actually three different kinds. Okay? Now that I said that, I just realized that the three levels of rest, by the way, if I swat at the flies, we figured out where those are coming from. We have pot plants in the house. We think that the flies, they're little tiny flies. We think they're coming out of the pots. So, and I'm a firm believer in having house plants inside the house. Not the fake stuff, the real stuff, because they recirculate your air. You can't buy a better air freshener, air purifier than a plant, right? So, and unfortunately, plants are living and they bring life into the house, and not all of it is welcomed life. Does that make sense? Anyway, so if you see me swatting at the flies, I apologize for that in advance. All right, so three different kinds of endurance. The first kind, we're going to go in terms of duration, right? The first type of endurance is how many measures can you go without taking the horn off your lips? and still have a good sound, still have the same flexibility, same range, and all that stuff. Now, you can have the same, what am I saying? You can have for that endurance and the other endurance, it can be different. I don't know why I said same. I meant different. You can have different endurance. You can for this stuff, and this is the kind of endurance that if you've ever read Herbert L. Clark's autobiography, this is the type of endurance that he's talking about. Because he talked about how he realized when he was playing hymns. Now, Herbert L. Clark, if I remember the autobiography correctly, he's from Canada. Originally, he was born in Canada. He learned how to play trumpet in Canada. All right? And I don't know why I had to say that. But I'm remembering the stories that he told in the book. He said when he had to play hymns at church, if he had to do 2 or 3 hymns, he didn't have the endurance for that. And one of the characteristics of hymns is when you're playing hymns, you don't take the horn off your lips. And that's a different kind of endurance from the other 2 that we're going to talk about. So what his solution was to just make himself do more and more repetitions of hymn without taking the horn off his face. Now, I believe that kind of, well, all endurance, but that kind of endurance is a byproduct of strength. I also believe that you can gain strength through endurance. That, one of my students recently was talking about endurance issues that he was having. And he had a book by Hickman and a book that I recommended to him was Weist, Keys to Natural Performance. And in both of those, they made a distinction between power and endurance. And to me, increasing your strength is beneficial to both of those. That's how I see it. Now, it's not to say that those guys are wrong. I'm not suggesting that they're wrong. Okay? I do think that the argument that power and endurance are 2 separate issues, I do think that's more of a semantic thing. In other words, just the words that people use to describe it. So I could see if you speak a certain way, then what they're saying is probably going to be true. But my lessons tend to be more of a practical nature. And I know that sounds insulting to some people if they are big fans of those. And once again, I think what we're talking about is semantics. I'm not so concerned with what something is as I am about what works. Okay? And yes, I understand that I can see the distinction between. So, like, let's talk about what they teach, and then I'll tell you what the difference is between what they teach and what I teach. Okay? They teach that for increasing endurance, you do lower load for longer periods of time. So I guess, like, for example, a hymn, let's say you're doing a hymn that only goes up to C or D in the staff, and you just play that hymn over and over and over and over again. And I don't necessarily have a problem with that approach. I'm not saying that's wrong, that that doesn't work. Of course that works. People wouldn't be teaching that if it didn't work. And then they, on the flip side of that, as if it contrasts this, and this is where I have the problem. They contrast that with powerful playing. And that's the problem that I have with what they teach. Because first of all, I don't think powerful playing is as physical as what people believe. If you want to be a powerful player, I think it's actually a myth. I think it's actually a myth that to play more powerfully, you have to exert more effort. I think that's a myth. So that's a big problem there. So if I'm right, and it doesn't actually take that much effort to play more powerfully, that what you're talking about now at this stage is more the way I teach it, right? If you're trying to play more powerfully, you're trying to find a different combination of resistance versus air. The whole power thing, when you see those guys doing that, their resistance is too high and they're pushing the air too much, and they're pushing the two of those against each other. And I'm guilty of that too, don't get me wrong. Everybody is at first. Everybody is guilty of this at first because they haven't found that perfect combination yet. So that's where I have a problem with what's traditionally taught. Now, let's be clear, I'm not speaking specifically against Wiest. I love Wiest. And my understanding is that he just passed away recently. Wiest and I can't remember who approached who, but in the 90s, Wiest and I exchanged books. He was interested in my books. I was interested in his books. So I sent him some of my books, and he sent me two of his books. I actually value his books above all of the other books. I'm pointing over there because that's where my bookshelf is. I value his books over all the rest. In fact, his books have influenced my books, the ones that I've written since I read his books. I think his book, especially the one, well, I have two of his books, Natural Performance, and the other one is Famous Trumpet Players. And basically what he did was take quotes from famous trumpet players and categorize them according to topic. And then he has his own well done, beautifully done commentary. I think he's got the best trumpet commentary in that book that I've ever seen, the most intelligent, concise, beautiful, beautiful writing. So don't take what I'm saying as me going against what he said or what Hickman said. I'm assuming, hello, Anthony, nice to see you. And I'm just taking what those two people are saying and assuming that this is the common practice. And that's why I'm going on so long about this. I don't think what I teach is in alignment with what's common. When it comes to endurance, I don't believe that what I teach is consistent with what everybody else teaches. I think what I teach is different. Okay? Now, what is the essence of that difference? When you get down to the bottom of it, what I believe contributes to this difference is they have not taken into account what some trumpet players refer to as familiarity. I'm thinking of the wrong words. Efficiency. Why am I saying familiarity? Now, you have to have familiarity to get efficiency. That's another thing. So even the guys that talk about efficiency, they don't talk much about familiarity. You have to have familiarity to get the efficiency. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So, how does efficiency play into endurance? That should be a no-brainer, right? Efficient means that you get more out of less. When we're speaking about endurance, efficiency is when you get more endurance out of less effort. But how that translates to the horn is a very practical, very easy to understand issue. It's about playing to the center of the pitch of the horn. It's not about playing in tune. Don't get those two things mixed up. Okay? So I'll get to your question in a second, Anthony. This is a question I got on the website. So, and I got distracted. How do you have efficiency on the trumpet? It's about playing in tune to the trumpet, not in tune with the band. They are not the same thing. So basically, the way this works is a more in tune with the trumpet, let's call it a centered pitch, not a centered sound. A centered sound is something different. A centered pitch is a pitch that plays at the center of the vibrating frequency for that harmonic. If you play at the center of the pitch for that note on that instrument, the way the tuning is, the instrument will now resonate fully. If you play above that resonant pitch, it will not resonate fully. If you play beneath that resonant pitch, it will not resonate fully. Now, any approach to power or endurance that does not take into account efficiency and this resonance is misleading, because you can play for a much longer period of time. You can play with much more power without as much effort when you have a resonant pitch, when you vibrate the instrument at a resonant pitch. Because when you do that, the instrument almost plays itself. So everything on the horns becomes easier. And if it's easier, you're going to have more endurance and more power. So I don't see a practical use for separating your effort. Now I'm working on my endurance. Now I'm working on my power. I don't see that as a practical solution. I see that, I have for many years now been talking about the problem with academic music instruction, right? And what I mean by academic is academic where basically the analysis is the substance. So we say, look at that great trumpet player. He's doing this, this, and that. I guess I have to do this, this, and that. Or I'll never play like him. But without actually asking the dude, did you do this, this, and that? I had a student last year for Christmas gave me a book. It's an interview with Bill Holman. The guy conducting the interview is an academic. Bill Holman was not. And there was one point, and I knew that, so to me, this was validating, right? At one point, I knew that the interviewer had become, once again, academic. He had asked Bill Holman a question. I don't remember the precise question, right? He had asked Bill Holman this question, and with almost an assumption that the answer would be yes, because that's academically what is taught. And in academics, they look and they analyze and they see A, B, and C. So when you're writing, you must do A, B, and C. If they see a performer, A, B, and C, well, then you must do A, B, and C. That's how academic music study is broken down, right? It's all about analysis. That, as a practical approach to learning how to do this stuff, doesn't work. It's got flaws. So when he asked Bill Holman that question, Bill Holman says, no, absolutely not. I loved it. I loved it. Right? No, that's not how I do it, he says. He says he doesn't even believe in that. And if we were, and by the way, this is why I don't approve of the hero worship approach that we have in music education. Because it always leads to these glossing over of these conflicts. This should have been a conflict, and they should have worked this out. Because here's a myth that this guy is propagating. Then the guy that they actually worship, practically worship, says, no, this myth is not true. And all you have to say, I don't remember exactly what he said, but something along the lines of, oh, that's interesting. Why not at that point, if you're going to do this right and have these interviews, why not say at that point, why does this conflict with what we've been teaching? Why is this so different? That's the time to do that. Now, taking it back to endurance, that's what I'm doing right now. I'm saying that as a practical approach, I'm not saying you're not going to increase your endurance that way, but it's not nearly as effective as what I teach. And I know a lot of people can't even grasp what I'm teaching because they'll say, how do I get better endurance? Well, if you really break it down, how my system works for getting better endurance, the most important thing you should do to get better endurance is be listening to great trumpet players 10 hours a week. That's the first step for increasing your endurance. And most people can't see the connection. And because they can't see the connection, they won't do the 10 hours. And that's part of why we have these Q&As, right? That's why we're doing this, so that I can explore these things with you. I'm sorry, Anthony, for going on so long. I'll get to your questions, I promise. So yes, I hope this is... Now, let's talk about that. How does listening to trumpet players 10 hours a week help your endurance? Well, if endurance is enhanced or even minimized, if the need for endurance is minimized by playing more efficiently. And playing efficiently is by playing to the center of the pitch. How do you know that you're playing to the center of the pitch? There is no way to know that. You can't measure it. In order to know, you would have to measure the resonance, the instrument, the column of air inside the instrument, and then you would have to measure the frequency coming out of your lips, the vibration of your lips. That's not going to happen in real time. You might be able to get people who study stuff with machinery and stuff. But in practice, when you're actually doing it on stage or in your practice session, you can't do those measurements. That's just very clear, right? The only way you can know if you're playing to the center of the pitch is to recognize what that sounds like. And the only way to recognize what that sounds like is to saturate your ears in that sound. Okay, so to get endurance, the very first step in building your endurance should be 10 hours of listening to great trumpet players per week. Indefinitely. This should go on for at least 7 years of your life. 7 years of your life listening 10 hours a week. That's why if you start when you're in junior high and when you get to college, whew, I would love to do an experiment on a student, right? Get somebody to actually live in the house and I make them listen 10 hours a week, right? And see what kind of trumpet player they would be. Of course, there's other issues involved. Okay, so now let's look at, we got 2 more things. This won't take nearly as long, Anthony. There is longer term endurance. So like, can you play a 3-hour gig, a 4-hour gig, a 6-hour gig? I actually think that takes more lip strength than the one where you're just playing it on the face like that. I actually think that takes more lip strength. Now I believe that my routines are designed to make that second type of endurance better. Now, the next kind of endurance is how many days in a row can you play? And I don't have that kind of endurance. Now I do have that kind of endurance if you're not pushing my like if it's not loud and if it's not real high, I can play every day. But I look at what these guys do on Broadway, I can't do that. Now, could I, if I took the gig, after a few weeks get used to it? Yes, probably I would get used to it. But right now, I don't have that kind of endurance. All right, Anthony, I apologize for taking so long. Anthony says, what came first, the chicken or the egg or the rhythm or the notes? I think it's the rhythm. Playing, you are supposed to use the same air as like you use when you are singing, yes. I don't think so. Speaking, I said I was going to answer that. I answered it when I was reading your question. You say speaking, I say singing. It should be just like you're singing, not speaking. I think speaking has too many inflections in it. Better to put singing. And that's one of the reasons why we do the singing and fingering. I don't know if I've demonstrated that. If I'm practicing something, now remember, the way I practice, I believe in repetition. Repetition is one of those unpopular things now that they tried to get away with, or get away from. And I think the idea was that it's too boring and the kids don't want to, they don't have that attention span. when in reality, it's the boring stuff that gives them the attention span. If you didn't make them do the boring stuff, they wouldn't have a attention span. So you end up with students that have shorter attention span because you didn't do anything to increase it, right? So I'm a firm believer in repetition, and almost everything that we do, we should be doing 10 times each. All right. So if I'm practicing something, I'm going to do that until I've played that passage 10 times. Play it, sing it, play it, sing it. And when I'm singing it, it's not on my lips. Nope, I take it off the lips. The primary purpose of doing that is to take it off the lips. The initial reason I started taking it off the singing was to fill that time while I had the horn off my lips. So that's a big part of what I teach. And by the way, that's consistent with building endurance. It's consistent with building endurance. So I'm not going to say that there is no muscular strength involved in building endurance. I'm not suggesting that. There is some. There is some muscular strength required. There's just not so much strength required that you're going to have veins popping out of you. Now, do I sometimes have veins popping out of my head? Yes, that means I'm not quite there yet. Hello, Javier. Nice to see you. All right. So Javier says, hello, Eddie. Nice to see you. Haven't been able to join lately and haven't played the trumpet, but I'm now coming back to it. That's a good thing, right? We shouldn't always be playing. I'm not one of the only trumpet teachers that will ever say it's good to take time off normally. So what you said there, this is, and by the way, this is how every lesson, even the ones that have heard me say this 50 times, this is how we do the lesson when they haven't practiced. I take what they just said, and I'm going to analyze what you just said here. Haven't been able to. Okay? Haven't been able to. And usually there's an implication there that other stuff is going on in your life. And it's that other stuff that gives us a reason to play music, right? So I actually believe that those other things that prevent us from playing the horn are the things that make our music better. I actually firmly believe that. Now, there is a problem with that. If you have some lazy students, and they will use that as an excuse just to not practice, there is that. I mean, I think most people who would oppose what I teach would probably oppose it for that reason, because there are lazy students. I think what happened to me that made it different so that I wouldn't see things that way anymore, I burned out in 1997. And I remember saying to myself when I quit teaching, I went from 97 to 2003 without teaching weekly lessons. I didn't stop teaching altogether. I did continue to write books. I did continue to teach one-time lessons. And what's amazing, I think it's miraculous. For that 6 years, I got people coming in from all over the world. Now, to be honest, to be open and clear about it, they weren't flying across the world to see me. They had business in Houston, and they said, while I'm in Houston, I want to take a lesson with Eddie. And they would take 4-hour lessons. Hello, Vladimir. They would take 4 hours of lessons in one day, and then I wouldn't have to deal with them anymore, right? And because I had taught for so long, and I remember when I quit teaching the weekly lessons, I remember saying to myself, I'm tired of caring more about their trumpet playing than they do. And I'm going to say that one more time. I said to myself, I'm tired of caring more about their playing than they do. And you know what? That's just bad teaching. It's not my job to make the students better players. It's my job to teach the students and give them all the tools that they need to become a better player. But I don't make them. It's sort of like that old saying, you can lead a horse to water, you can't make them drink, right? You can't make the horse drink. Okay? It's the same thing. So what happened when I started teaching again in 2003 is I said to myself, I will never care more about the trumpet students' progress than they do. And that's what set me up for my new philosophy about teaching lessons. That's what helped me. Basically, what you could call this is a business model, right? My trumpet teaching business model is that I'm going to adopt your goals for yourself in the lesson. Now, I have a method, and we will use that method when it's appropriate for your goal. But I'm not going to say you need to become this or you need to become that. Instead of that, to take all that heartache out of it, I decided, and this was about, I think, 2005 that I made this decision. Because, you can't just not care about the students, right? So that, if I hadn't been careful, I could have ended up being one of those guys that just sits in the lesson and takes the money. And that's not who I am. I can't be like that, right? So how do you not care more than they do without becoming this guy that just sits there cross-armed and takes the money and doesn't care about the students? How do you do that? Well, that's what this business model is all about. You take their goal. And that's why when a student comes to me and says, oh, I don't want to try out for All-State, we don't try to do the All-State stuff. On the flip side, if someone says all I care about is All-State, then that's all we're going to do is what they need to do to make All-State. If I have a student that says all I want is to learn how to play this song, then that's all we're going to do. And I don't mean necessarily, like the All-State thing, I don't mean that we're only going to ever practice the All-State music. We're going to do the stuff in the lesson that's going to make them good enough to make All-State. I'm not talking about spoon-feeding them the All-State material. I'm not saying that. And it's the same thing with the song. If that song requires skills that they don't have, we have to learn those skills first. I can't just, because nobody wants to play a song and sound terrible at it, right? So yes, my business model now is that I take the students' goals and we address those goals in the lessons, not my goals. And they have access to all of my materials. They have access to all of my experience as a teacher. They have access to my time and the stuff we're going to do right now in the lesson. But we're going to use all of that to accomplish their goals. That's my music lesson business model. And so why am I telling you that? Because this whole thing that people say, oh, but what about those lazy students? When you have this business model where you're taking on the students' goals, the students' ambitions, the students' desires, and helping that student almost like a coach accomplish those goals. When you do it that way, you don't have lazy students. Especially if you charge enough, right? That's also something, right? The people who complain about lazy students are probably not charging enough. I'm sorry, but it's true. So yes, getting back to what you're saying, Javier, life, in his next comment, he says, sometimes life gets in the way. I haven't lost my chops though. And that also gets back to my teaching approach. If you learn the chops the way I'm teaching you, and then, so the important thing is, let's say you go 2 or 3 weeks without playing, which is not uncommon. If you're living a real life where you have responsibilities and you honor those responsibilities, it's very easy to go 2 or 3 weeks without playing the horn. When you come back, you go straight to the routine, the daily routine or the Chops Express or one of the Trumpet Chops routines. You go straight to that. You should not have any chop problems because of the time you spent off. If you do have chop problems, then there is probably an embouchure issue there. You either use too much pressure and you're swollen all the time, because what happens with people who play on swollen chops, and that's their MO, is 2 weeks off, 3 weeks off, and all of that swelling will be gone when they come back. And now they can't play because they rely on that swelling. So I'm always very careful, right? The stuff that I teach does not work for everybody, and that's one of the exceptions. If you play on a swollen up embouchure, and this is not a judgment. I'm not saying, oh, shame on you if you play on a swollen embouchure. No. Some people play like that. But my system doesn't work for those people. Not at all. It's an entirely different way to play. It's I think it's a terrible way to play. Don't get me wrong. I said that I'm not judging. I used to play that way. I'm not judging them. I'm just recalling the memory of what it's like to live like that. Because in order to make that work, if you have swollen chops and that's how you play, in order to make that work, you must practice the same amount every day. You can't take a day off. In fact, you have to practice the same materials every day. And for best results, you need to play the same time every day. So like if you practice 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock every morning, and that's what works best for you, then you should always practice 8 to 10 every morning if that's what kind of chops you play on. If you play on swollen chops, you have to practice that way. Because the swelling because basically when you practice on when you need swollen chops to play, your practice time is basically a swelling management. You have to manage the swelling. You can't let it swell too much, or it stops the vibration. If you let it, the swelling go too far away, if you let it, if you let the swelling go down, then you won't have enough swelling to play. So practicing to you becomes nothing more, or let's say it this way, it becomes primarily about maintaining the proper swelling in your lips. And now you have to practice every day for the same amount every day on the same exercises every day. I could not do that. I quit the trumpet because of that. Anthony says, I play every day practice for over 2 hours, and every time I want to take a day off, my wife says to me, because my brother-in-law is not using my practice room. Just so you know, Anthony, I'm a believer in not practicing every day. I'm a firm believer in breaking that up. But I know you know that because of you read my book. Enrico says, please help me. I don't know how to play with tonguing, and my embouchure is too weak. So so the tonguing, I like the way that Miles Davis taught. So Miles Davis was on an interview. I think it was the late 80s, might have been early 90s, I don't remember. And he was talking to the host and talking about how his teacher taught him how to tongue. And he said he got a bag of rice. He put a piece of rice on his tongue and he spit it. Put another piece of rice and he spit it. And he spit the whole bag. And then he did that on the trumpet. And basically you're spitting the note. Now, if that gets you going, that's not stylistically necessarily such a good thing. But if you're having trouble tonguing, this is a great way to get started. Imagine that you're spitting the rice into the trumpet. And I think that's a wonderful. You know, my trumpet videos, the ones with the educational stuff in them, this month are all about culture and that handing down of wisdom from generation to generation to generation. One of the reasons we should be watching those interviews and the master classes and stuff like that is because that's our direct connection to that wisdom. And I would have never heard this thing about spitting rice if Miles Davis hadn't said it on primetime television. So yes, that's one way to do it. Now the embouchures, I recommend that you go back and look at the rest of this video when it's finished, because we talk about endurance. Now, if you have an embouchure that is too weak to play the trumpet, then you must do other stuff. I had someone that sent me an email, and then I just got too busy to respond to him after he sent me the first. I sent him a response, he sent me another response, and he told me that he had already tried to contact Charlie Porter, and I like Charlie Porter, by the way. I think Charlie Porter has the best videos on YouTube. Let me just say that. And then second best is that guy in the UK. I forget his name. I always forget the UK guy's name. But he's my second favorite. Charlie Porter is my favorite. So I don't, I'm not one of those guys that gets jealous. So this guy said he had already talked to Charlie Porter, and Charlie Porter says don't do muscle strengthening exercises away from the trumpet. It's better to do that on the trumpet. And I've been saying exactly that since the 90s. But there's an exception. If you have strength issues that are preventing you from playing the trumpet, then now you don't have that option. You don't have the option to just play the horn and that'll build your strength. You don't have that because you can't play the horn yet. So in that situation, I do believe in using one of the Pete exercises. I've got the free version. Every once in a while, if you buy something, I think you had to spend $200. You can get this for free. So I got the free one. I had one that was silver and I liked it. And then I lent it to a student. I've been burnt so many times by students and my favorite mouthpiece that I ever played on, I lent it to a student who had been with me for 6 months or something like that. And then as soon as I lent him the mouthpiece, he disappears. My favorite mouthpiece in the world, right? And then I call up the company that made it. And they said they have I bought it in the early 80s. They have no record of that mouthpiece. So they couldn't replace it for me. So yeah, I had a silver one of these. I lent it to a student. Student never came back. One of these days, I'm going to learn my lesson. Literally, I remember one year I counted up how many things that my students took off with, and it was over $500 worth of stuff. And I don't blame them. I blame me for being such a pushover. Right? All right. So the way this exercise works, now there's two exercises. I would rather use the pencil than this for that side because it's not heavy enough, especially the plastic one. But this one is clever. You put this between the lips and the teeth. You pull it while you hold it in with your lips. Now, I do agree with Charlie Porter. If you're already functioning on the horn, this is not a exercise you want to do. Okay? But the guy that emailed me, and maybe that's you, because I don't remember his name. I apologize. I get literally hundreds of these emails, and I can't always get all the names straight. So if that's you again, I apologize for not recognizing the name. So what made me recommend this to that person who emailed me was the way he worded it. He said, no matter what he does on the trumpet, it still doesn't help. Well, then that opens up the door to say maybe it's not the time you're spending on the trumpet. So that's why I recommended this. I don't normally recommend this to someone who can already play. I hope that makes sense. So in that regard, and it's probably more accurate for me to say that Charlie Porter agrees with me because I've been saying that probably since before he started playing the trumpet. So I don't believe in doing strength building exercises for the chops outside of the horn. If you're if you're already playing the horn. I hope that makes sense. But the reason I recommend it sometimes is if that's clearly not working, then you can use a device like that. Javier says, you recommend taking less rest between exercises in the daily routine if you got good at it. For example, oh, I see what you're saying. Oh, I didn't see the do. I apologize. Do you recommend taking less rest between exercises in the daily routines if you got good at it? For example, if the apprentice routine is now easy, the goal would be finishing the routine faster and have more time for the music practice. Yes, just be careful. Like, I think the shortest time I would go for is half. Okay, so let's say it takes you let's make it 10 seconds. It takes 10 seconds to play the exercise. The shortest I would ever go is 5 seconds. But you know what I would rather do if I was in that situation, Javier? I would rather do the Chops Express and go slower. And the reason for, and I shouldn't say rather, that's how I do it. I will start chunking exercises. The less time I have, the slower I go. Imagine what that's like, because I can tell you, I know what it's like to try to cram stuff in a shorter time. I know how that can affect the psyche. So when my time that I have to practice gets shorter, I start taking exercises out. Not exercise types. Like, so in the Chops Express, let's say I don't have time to do the whole Chops Express. I'll skip that first long tone set and do the second long tone set instead. And instead of all four tonalization studies, I'll do 2 of the tonalization studies. That way I can go really slow, take that full time off between, and then go really slow on the next exercise. I can't tell you, because not everything that we do is about the chops. There's also a bunch of this going on too. Remember what I say. We've talked about this before. 95, 98, 99% of what we do is mental in nature. And we've talked about why that's true. I don't mind talking about it again, but we're kind of out of time now. 95, 98% of what we do is mental in nature. And because it's mental in nature, it's also fragile. It's also fragile, meaning that any negative thoughts, any distraction, anything that makes us lose our focus, anything that can poison our focus can have a negative impact on our playing. So by trying to squeeze more into less time, you can affect yourself mentally that will have physical effects on the horn. It's much better to be calm, relaxed, play fewer exercises, and then do them slow, put plenty of space in between, breathe calmly, and then do your music. That way there's no panic. I do have I call it the shortest routine or something like that. Let me see what I call it. And I have a lot of students that do this because they simply don't have time to do a full routine. What I'd like to do is publish a whole book of these for each different level. Okay, it's not coming up. Is it not on my? Oh, I think I used the word quick. I think I call it a quick warm-up. Nope, it's not coming up. Let me type warm-up. It's not coming. I don't know if I've published this. It might not be published. Nope, it's not published. I'll have to do something about that. But yes, I have a warm-up that takes less than 5 minutes. So, and it follows the trumpet pyramid. So, Javier says, I get it. How much time should it take to finish Chops Express? Chops Express should be 15 minutes or less. The lower routines, like the one you're talking about, Tyro, Tyro should be like 10 minutes. Oh, so I see what you're saying. You're already doing the Chops Express. Yeah, so you know what? You can let me pull that book out. Let's be specific here. So yes, you can do long tone number 2 instead of both of them. You can do only 2 of the tonalization studies. You could do 2 and 4 of the lip slurs. You could do 2 and 4 of the. You might want to do more of the articulation, like do 1, 3, and 4 on the articulation, and then just one of the multiple tone. That shouldn't take you more than 5. Yes, 30 minutes is too long. The Chops Express should not. I think I even say this in the introduction. These routines should not take you more than 15 minutes ever. Okay. See, that's what these Q&As are. When I first started doing the Q&A, it was for this. Not just for general questions. People will have questions about the books. And yes, that's definitely too long for the Tyro level. That's way too long for the Tyro level. It shouldn't take more than 15 minutes. All right, guys. Well, I've got to go now. It's always great to see you. Thanks for hanging out. God bless you. And we'll see you next time. Maybe I'll take next week off because it's between Christmas and New Year. Just keep an eye open. I don't know. We might do it anyway. We'll see. Anyway, God bless you. See you next time. Bye.